Hello, everyone. I'm Ralph, a software engineer here at Genesys, and I would like to share in this DevDrop how to use Amazon API Gateway to invoke Genesys Cloud APIs. And this is part 9, conclusion and final thoughts. With all of the things that we've discussed in this DevDrop and having multiple parts, I would just like to give some key takeaways from this one. So an API gateway is a useful component that acts as a middleman to your client and backend that centralizes control, improves performance, and enhances security in your system. And with the Amazon API gateway, it has two types. It's the HTTP API and the REST API. Uh, and given your use case and, of course, your budget to your system, you'll choose either of the two that helps invoking the Genesys Cloud API. So for the HTTP API, you'll use it if you need to just pass through the data from the client to the backend and vice versa. And you'll only be needing some basic features like logging, monitoring, and some simple security features. If you want more features, you'll be using the REST API. And there are two ways for you to call the Genesys Cloud API and the REST API. The first one is the proxy integration, which is appropriate if you will just pass through the request from the client to the backend. And if you need to process or manipulate the request before sending the data to the backend or before sending the data back to the client, you can use non-proxy integration. So that's it. That's what we've discussed in this DevDrop. So after you've created the API gateway for your use case, I'll just leave some tips on how to manage it. And the first one is the most important one. Do fully utilize the features of the Amazon API gateway, especially on the logging, monitoring, caching, and security features. Do explore all its capabilities, and once you've explored, once you've experimented those, use what you'll need. And I have provided some of the things that I highly recommend that you'll be using. So for logging, do use the AWS CloudWatch to have a detailed information on what the API gateway processes, which I have seen in the previous videos that when looking at the AWS CloudWatch, you can see that the information at the start and until the end of specific requests. And then for the monitoring, do use AWS CloudTrail to have insights and analytics on the usage of the API gateway. And then for security, which is the most important thing to also enable, AWS has provided a lot of security features, but I would like to highlight three. The first one is the AWS WAF for common web exploit protections. The second one is the provided authorization features for unauthorized access prevention. You can use the AWS IAM or the AWS Cognito for it. And then the last one is to do use the throttling features to help prevent excessive API requests from overwhelming upstream services. And this also prevents you from having a high cost of AWS usage. The fourth one is for performance, use caching whenever necessary. You can see it in my demonstration that there are certain data that you can cache. And once you think that it's always being used, cache it. And then lastly, for deployment, do utilize the stages and integrate it in your software development lifecycle. This helps your teams in mitigating bugs and issues before being deployed in your production stage or environment. So that's my tips in order for you to maximize and to have full capabilities of the Amazon API gateway. And the last one is utilizing that API gateway with CLI, CXS code, and SDKs. So in the previous parts, I've discussed that the Genesys Cloud CLI, CXS code, and SDKs support gateway configuration, which you can set up very, very easily. And the only key takeaway that I will leave here is that for these tools, you must provide the login path in your API gateway if you're using authorization grants to have access to the Genesys Cloud API. And that concludes my DevDrop on how to configure Amazon API Gateway to invoke Genesys Cloud APIs. Do visit our Developer Center for more guides, blogs, blueprints, and DevDrops like this. I hope to see you again on my next DevDrop. Bye.